Hi, everybody. Lynn Cox here, clinical hypnotherapist. I help women who have overcome domestic violence as well as childhood abuse just more quickly and effectively overcome the symptoms related to that. Symptoms can be wide ranging, although there are a cluster of very similar symptoms. So I just want to talk quickly about why I am communicating that I'm helping those two groups, because some would maybe think, well, those are two different groups of people. Unfortunately, it's very, very common, and there's a lot of data to support this data, research, and studies, as well as personal and anecdotal experience, that often those two go hand in hand. There's a reason why it's called the cycle of violence. Women who do end up in domestic abuse, violent relationships with violent partners, and I'm talking about violence in particular, not your run of the mill narcissistic partner. There's a lot of content about that lately. I'm talking about abusive, violent partners. Were often experienced abuse as children, whether it be physical, emotional, sexual, or of that nature. So those two often go hand in hand, unfortunately. And so that's why I'm, committed to helping women who have had likely both of those experiences. Sometimes just one. There's not always 100% rule. And I want to talk a little bit more about kind of why that is and some of the impacts. So, logically speaking, nobody as an adult, sorry, nobody as an adult would say, sure, partner me up with somebody who is going to be who's going to physically assault me, possibly physically assault my children, and be terrifying to live with. Sure, I'll sign up for that. Obviously not. What does happen though often is when children experience violence and abuse, um, many things happen. But one of the rules of the mind is, sorry, that's my dog down there. He just got home from his walk. One of the rules of the mind is we are really drawn to and love what is familiar. So if it's a familiar experience instilled as a young person, and especially in younger ages when the brain's really developing and beliefs are being formed, familiar to be in a household with violence, with terror, with all of these sorts of things going on, um, that becomes familiar to that specific person, and then it can often it often then leads to this cycle of abuse, being with people who will be violent and abusive. We like what is familiar. We are drawn to what's familiar, even if it's not good for us. So I have worked with a number of clients who have tried to shed weight, for example, and who have had long struggles with that. And I use this as a more benign example. I mean, knowing that like snacking habits or specific food addictions, i.e., to sugar in particular, we can logically know that's not healthy for us. Often though there are beliefs underlying that those habits and those addictions, but it's a familiar pattern and familiar habits. And we are, as humans, we follow routine, we follow direction. Beliefs are ingrained, and our habits of action follow our habits of belief. Relating it back to childhood abuse and domestic abuse, though, if you've experienced that as a child, you also didn't choose to have those experiences, yet those patterns and cycles have become ingrained. And then often women, and I'm talking about women in particular because I'm actually dealing with women with this particular issue. Definitely men and boys experience this as well too. It's just how I've chosen to focus my business and my practice. So we're constantly drawn to what's familiar. It's patterned beliefs, patterned reactions, patterned thoughts, and Not that anybody chooses to say, hey, like really consciously or logically partner me up with somebody who's going to be horrible and abusive and scary, but that stuff is at a very deep subconscious level and ingrained. The good thing is, though, is we can make the unfamiliar familiar. It does require recognition, and it also does require a choice. So you have to be able to see it, pull yourself, get a little bit of a different perspective, and be able to see it from the outside. Be willing to look at the harsh truth that this is perhaps what's gone on with your experience and your choices. Because even if these are ingrained beliefs and then ingrained habits and patterns that you're living out, there is always still a choice point. There's typically a choice as an adult. As an adult, children don't have the choice. That's the part of it that makes it, very detrimental and quite disturbing. But as adults, even if we've had those beliefs, habits, experiences ingrained as normal and familiar, we have choice as adults. So to be able to accept that fact and look at it, that can be a very difficult part of the process for people. But that's the starting point then, to be able to choose what you'd rather have be familiar. So I'm going to go back to the experience that I have shared. I was in a violent relationship as an adult, which I was able to look at and assess from this perspective. I also did have horrible childhood abuse, and I could see when I was able to pull myself out of that violent adult relationship, was able to see those things, but then was able to make a choice. I understood it. So understanding on the logical level, though, only takes you so far. That is the first place that you have to start. And then there are ways to more quickly and rapidly make the unfamiliar familiar. But it takes a choice, and then it takes some actions. And I have to say, and I just reread again, well, re-listened to an audiobook. I read the book years ago, The Body Keeps the Score. The things that are, in my experience, and as well as being proven by science now, most effective, not talk therapy. Not talk therapy, and there's actually a growing body of research that talk therapy for people who've had those traumatic experiences can be detrimental, in fact, over helpful, were yoga, martial arts, journaling and creative writing, and then hypnotherapy, rapid transformational therapy, which I am now, or have been since 2019, certified clinical hypnotherapist. Those were the most effective treatment therapies once I'd been able to look, assess, see what was happening, why it had been happening, and then make the decision to make the unfamiliar familiar. Those were the most rapid and effective methods that I found. So anyway, I just wanted to make that connection because I've recently just, changed some information on some of my banners and marketing material to let people know. I'm highly interested in helping women through these experiences. I hear far too much and see far too much of longer term suffering than is necessary or required. Maybe some treatments and therapies that aren't as helpful or quick and rapid as they could be. So that's just a couple points to keep in mind. Yes, often the childhood abuse does lead to then experiences of adult abuse. The mind will typically just go to what's familiar. So there's a reason for that. But that you can make the unfamiliar familiar. But you have to be willing to be a little bit honest with yourself. It can be a hard pill to swallow, I think, for some, but that's definitely necessary. And then a choice. And then once that choice is made, there are different therapies and modalities that are very effective and helping people regain self-regulation, control over their nervous system, because that's one thing that can get really frazzled and knocked out of whack, as well as to be able to have a different self-perception and different experiences. So that is all I wanted to say about that. These are very difficult subjects for people to deal with and people to address. And there are quicker ways to change your experience to make the unfamiliar familiar, so that you can enjoy closer relationships, so that you can have a better relationship with your body and your physical health, as well as your mental and emotional health. And so I'll be talking much more about this in coming days, weeks, months, and years. I don't want to get too hung up in the statistics, but there are a vast number of people who have these experiences. And, outside of what's reported in different countries and different institutes, or like justice institutes or institutes of health, I would hazard a guess that those numbers are even higher, because many people don't even get documented as having those experiences. So suffering through life is not a requirement. Staying single, never having another relationship, that's not a requirement. Feeling terrible about yourself or confused about who you even really are, it doesn't have to be that way. And actually, one of my first spiritual, and I would say psychological mentors as well too, who'd had a long career and history working with people with serious challenges and issues and hurts from the past. She would say it's never too late to have a happy childhood. You can't. There are things that are innate in us. They can get confused and dampened down by these awful past experiences, but it is possible to address them, change your habits of belief, which then change your habits of action, your patterns of thought, and then so much of your life can change for the better. So I hope everyone's having a great day, and I'll be on soon. Bye for now.